Good evening and welcome to this Happy Guru show. My name is Kirsty Bentley Taylor and I'm your host. I'm being joined today by the lovely Liz Cooper, who is the founder of the British Academy of Sound Therapy. Now, following on from last week's discussion where I talked about sound and the use of sound through spirituality and religion and how we can use sound to really anchor ourselves into the present moment, I was super keen to bring on somebody, a real professional, who would enable me to kind of grill them and find out as much as they know about sound within the working sphere that they do. So I'm thrilled to welcome Liz to the show. Liz, just getting straight in there, I wanted to know what brought you to sound therapy? Because, I mean, music we have around us all the time, but to actually utilize and engage with music as a form of therapy and recognize all that, can you tell us something about like your background, what brought you into this sphere?
Okay, so I've been working in holistic health for, let me think, it was, I think 1982 when I first started working with sort of alternative or complementary therapies. And I was always questing, you know, I was always trying to find the thing that really sort of made me, I guess, kind of floated my boat, if you like, in terms of therapies. And I tried lots of different things, and but like many of us when we're first starting out, we have our day job, you know, that pays the mortgage, you know, and you know, or a proper job as my mum would call it, you know, and then we have our heart work, right? And so that for me was very much trying to find the right therapies and to get my practice, if you like, off the ground. And so I worked in advertising. I had a very busy career in advertising. I was also trying to get a natural therapy centre going at the time. This was, I guess, the early 90s. And I just burnt out and just got very ill. And I had ME and lots of different complications, anxiety disorders and depression and so on.
Wow.
And just had to leave my job. I couldn't function. And so during that time, I was very much sort of in my bed, really. And so I decided that was when the idea of sound came to me, because I thought, what can I do here? I can't go out and have a treatment. So I just started using my voice. And I'd been to a workshop which was literally just on a particular type of singing, which was run by somebody who had just got back from Mongolia, and he'd learned overtone singing. And we just went to a workshop, and I thought, oh well, that was really quite nice. Let's practice that while I'm laying here, you know.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling so much better. And I thought, oh, well, maybe it's just because my mind was taken off of it, or, you know, whatever. And then one day I had a really chronic migraine. And so I got in the bath. I thought I'd light some candles, you know, and everything. And then being in the bathroom, which is always great for any kind of voice work that you're going to do because of the acoustics in there.
Yeah.
So I just got in the bath and started doing my overtone singing. And then I realised that I didn't have a headache anymore. And that was it. I thought, I've got to look into this, because it's just, you know, I always try and rationalize things. Although I love also the magic, you know, I think you always have to be open to a bit of magic in life, you know, but also I like to kind of also really think around things, or perhaps it was the warm water, perhaps it was just that I was relaxing or whatever. But it had happened too many times to be coincidence. So that's when I first decided I was going to study sound therapy.
Yeah, fantastic. So so again, so from a crisis came the real, like the link in with what it was that you had that you could give. And I would imagine as well, because I know that water is a great carrier of vibration as well. So you lying there in the bath and then singing out, and that vibration coming from within you outside. I mean, I find singing, I love singing. I always have since being a tiny little girl. And I've always found it's my thing to lift me up, you know, if ever I'm feeling down. And I was depressed for about 4 years. And one of the things that, when I started trying to pull myself out of it, one of the things that I recognized about myself is that I'd stopped listening to music, or not music per se, but my music, you know, the music that lit me up, the music that resonated with me. And then from then on, I kind of started just experimenting with chants and mantra, because we were living out in Thailand at the time. So I could go to a Buddhist temple and just sit there and receive this kind of beauty. I mean, I never knew what they were saying. That was part of it for me, to be honest. I didn't even need to know. It was just that vibration, and like it felt like a blessing to me. And so this was one of the reasons I was so interested in all the work that you guys do at the British Academy of Sound Therapy, but also to hear your side. You know, what was it that brought you towards sound? Because we're surrounded by it all the time, aren't we? I mean, I recognise some of the, I suppose, the most peaceful times in my life have been pickpocketed with sound, like a bird call in the morning as the sun rises. And where again, when we used to live in Thailand, we used to have the Muslim call to prayer echo around the mountains, and all these beautiful sounds that they just touch you in a different way, don't they? They resonate inside in different places. And this is, I suppose, why I really wanted to talk to you about the sound therapy, because tell me something about that then. This started your idea of something that you wanted to go and pursue, an interest that you wanted to pursue. So where did you go from that? Did you go to Mongolia?
I wish, actually. It's one of the places I haven't yet made my way to, but well, actually, yes, I did. I travelled because it was the early days of the internet, and there wasn't much information out there as there is now. And so I actually I got myself a little Himalayan singing bowl, which I found in a shop, and that was my first instrument, other than my voice, which was obviously the first instrument, but that was the first external instrument, if you like. So I began to play with this bowl, and I thought, well, that's interesting. It's kind of feels slightly different to me. It's moving my body in a different way. So then I thought, right, I'm going to go and look for the traditional ways that sound and music have been used. So I travelled a fair bit, and then came back with all of that information. And then I contacted the Institute for Complementary and Natural Medicine, which at that time was a big kind of umbrella body, for multidisciplinary body, if you like, for complementary therapies.
Yeah.
And because I was so passionate about, becoming a sound therapist, I really wanted to do that. And because of my work with therapy in the past, I knew that if I was going to do this, I wanted to have proper training. I wanted to be properly qualified. I wanted to have the insurance and things, and do it properly. Anyway, so basically, I came back, phoned the institute, and I said, I'd like to become a sound therapist. And I could hear them leafing through this book. Sound therapy, okay. Hear the pages turning. And they said, no, we don't have any sound therapy on our
No, because in like 2000, or the 1990s, I don't remember it ever being a thing over here.
It was. I mean, it's like all of these things, isn't it? They're ancient in their roots, but it's like therapies are being remembered. There must have been the time when reflexologies first started, and aromatherapy came to this country, and Reiki, and so on. And in that time, I mean, there were people who were working with sound, but they were, people who've been working with sound therapy for since the 70s, but they weren't in training courses, so basically they said their answer was, come back next year. We might have a school then. So I thought, okay, well, I've got all this information. I carried on doing a bit more traveling, and then I started to put together a technique based on, the experience I'd had while I was traveling, plus a lot of hours sitting with the instruments and discovering, well, each one there's actually a psychology around different instruments anyway, a violin compared to a cello, for example, and it's the same with the instruments that we use in sound therapy. So basically, the next year, I rang the Institute for Complementary Medicine and said, so any schools now, perhaps? And they said, no. So I said, well, look, I've got this technique, and what do I do? So they helped me. They were really supportive in helping me to actually start become the first recognised sound therapist in the UK that was recognised by them you know, in a technique which is now known as the BAST method of sound therapy, which is
Yeah, yeah.
the Academy Sound Therapy method. Yeah, that's it really. That's how it all happened.
Brilliant. Well done you for persevering. And does the BAST sound therapy cover, or does it dip into like the ancient use of singing bowls and tuning forks, and even I'm thinking like rattles and those sorts of things from like South American history and ancient music, and that, does it go into all of that, or is it specific instruments for specific parts of therapy to connect with different chakras or energy alignments or illnesses, or how does it work?
Goodness, right, okay.
Sorry.
um so when I was, one of the common threads that I found when I was traveling was that that music and sound is used for trancing, or for going into an altered state of consciousness. So that was the first thing that it, you know, so if you're using a rattle or you're using a drum or a singing bowl or your voice, you know, ultimately you're aiming to enter into this state. Now, whether it's similar, you know, in the shamanic traditions, whether it's about going to talk to spirits to get healing, energy, or whatever it is, the method is the same. You enter into some kind of trance or altered state. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is actually looking at how the brain actually cognitively processes sound, and the psychology behind the instruments and what they mean to us. So the meaning for us, so basically our approach now combines like a mindfulness self-reflective model and the sound. Now, years ago, we did used to work with a Vedic framework. So basically, we worked with the traditional model of energy flow in the body and chakras and balancing chakras and so on. But actually, as I continued my research, I actually found that that it was very difficult to get that kind of a model into the mainstream, because it was very difficult to have an evidence base to support what was going on. You know. And so I went back to university, and I got a master's degree in applied music psychology, and that was just an amazing, that just opened up a whole new world to me. You know, brain imagery, you know, fMRI, EEG, cortisol, dopamine, you know, all the whole thing that just really enabled me to be able to kind of, if you like, just turn the lens onto in a slightly different way. So still embracing a spiritual model, and still embrace, but maybe more towards the trancing than the energy flow, because you see what's going on in the brain. Through imaging. So I then had the evidence. I was able to then produce the evidence, which I wasn't at the subtle level, because at the moment there's very limiting technology that you can use to measure that, right? So, and because I was so passionate about getting this into the mainstream, because I'd seen so many amazing recoveries from people, that I just needed to kind of get this out there. So that was the way I could do it, through combining mindfulness and maximizing the method to enable people to go into a deep altered state of consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect method, really, because as we progress with all alternative therapies, the way that we are sort of conditioned, the way that we have grown as a species, is to really look to science first before ancient antidotes and ancient, you know, ways of doing things. But I really believe that a combination of the two is, first of all, much more acceptable mainstream, like you say, across the board to people, because if it can be explained by science, and it can be explained, like you say, even the magic can be explained a little bit, and that resonates with us all, because we all have, you know, no matter, I mean, I was brought up by scientists. My dad's a biochemist and my mum's a sociologist, and my dad was always like, oh, you know, anything that was alternative, he was very dismissive of it, but he still recognizes you know, sort of subconscious thoughts and feelings and those sorts of things, even though it's like, well, Dad, that doesn't, you know, you do realize that there's kind of not really the tie in there with what science says, and what he calls the woo woo, you know, what the woo woo says, you know. So I think I agree, like, to be able to get mainstream and cover a, you know, grander base of people, and really just get that out there as an alternative to big pharma and to psychology, you know, psychology and all these other different things that you now have to pay a fortune for, and, you know, that you have to wait a long time for to be able to have access to. It's a great idea to be able to bring the science in, bring the woo-woo in, if you like, and combine the two to have that kind of open up all the doors to sound therapy. Because I always feel like with sound, when I started thinking about sound last week, it's something that really, it's just such a massive part of our lives, isn't it? Like when you know, when you think about sound, it's everywhere. It's pretty much in everything. And it's from the minute you open your eyes until the minute you go to sleep. And there's so many messages that we get through from sound. And this is some of the sort of stuff that I wanted to kind of quiz you on today as well, is like the sort of sounds that we experience today in this time on the earth, opposed to, you know, like you would have experienced traveling sort of 20, 25, 30 years ago. What we experience now is so much more in terms of external sound pressure on ourselves, and what that means to our stress factors, because I mean, across the board, we're more stressed on the planet than we've ever been as a species. Whether or not you kind of think that sound has a lot of things to do with that, because there's a lot of sound out there in terms of, you know, car horns and exhaust, you know, like just the general noise of traffic and buses and trains and planes and automobiles and all those sorts of things. There's also people now talking openly on their phones and via, you know, you're constantly getting hit with different kinds of sound that you didn't used to have at one stage. And I remember, because I'm old enough, but I remember, you know, before the internet and before mobile phones, and actually you would walk down the road and it would be pretty peaceful. You know, it wouldn't be as loud as it is now. There weren't so many aeroplanes, there weren't so many cars. And certainly when you think about sound therapy, and I should imagine, because I've been to a couple of gong baths and always found them such wonderful experiences, and it's that piece before, as almost like the anticipation that I really love, like that just waiting for it to happen, and then that feeling afterwards. But all the sounds in between are a far cry from what we hear generally now, aren't they, in our day-to-day lives? So can you tell me a little bit about like the pitch and the tone of sounds that we experience now versus more therapeutic sounds, for example?
Yes, well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think because we have this mindfulness model, this self-reflective model in our method, and it's very much to do with resonance or resistance.
Yeah.
What you were saying earlier about, you know, having a foot in the science camp and a foot in the spiritual or woo-woo camp, if you like.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, you know, with the advancement in science when it comes to quantum physics, for example, the two sides are very much talking the same language. It's literally just, you know, so we know that energy follows thought, and you know, we can and we know that we are all energy. We're particles of energy. We're star stuff, right? And that was what the hippies would sing about in the 60s. And everybody would go, right, well, they're on something, but actually we are. And so when it comes to the way that our model works is taking readings within, you know, all the time. So because we are energy, and that energy is resonating, and our thoughts are a form of energy, and our energy follows our thoughts, right? So if you are walking down the street and it's a busy traffic environment and there's car horns and there's, you know, all of a sudden you're aware of that cacophony of environment that you're in. So then it's then what do I do with that? Right. So does that become a wonderful soundscape that I can I can immerse myself in? And something that's really interesting, and oh, isn't it interesting that car horn is in harmony with that's happening over there, or, you know, whatever. Or do we brace ourselves against it? and that then creates what we call resistance.
Yeah.
And because in physics, resistance causes well, basically it causes it like a dip in energy. It may cause pain in the body. It may cause emotional pain, unwanted thoughts, so all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, this environment, this should never happen. People shouldn't be making calls on ever. This shouldn't be so noisy. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And that dialogue goes on and on and on, and off you run with that story.
Yeah.
It's going to be life defeating,
Yeah.
right? So there's two ways of looking at it. There's the what do I do with this now way. So I have a choice, and then also what can I learn? So what can I learn from this experience going forward? So taking responsibility for, okay, so maybe I just can't live in this environment anymore. Maybe I have to make a choice.
Yeah.
So now we're now in the driving seat of our process, if you like, as to whether we decide to go and live in the country somewhere. Right. So that's one side of things. The other side is actually sound cognitions. It's actually the way we're wired to respond to sound. Now that is very difficult to I mean, we can logically process it in the brain. Okay, right, I'm hearing a car alarm, and it's kind of like, oh God, that's a shock. And then we process it's just a car alarm. It's part of a beautiful soundscape, and you can rationalize that one away.
Yeah.
However, because of the way we're wired, you hear a car alarm, you're going to receive a shot of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Right, and that's because of the way we're wired. We're wired to respond to alarm calls, and it goes way back to early man and womankind, where we would have been very acutely aware of animal distress calls, people distress calls. They would have told us that something was going on, either a predator was approaching or another tribe, or whatever it was.
Wow. Yeah.
So those kinds of things, they almost bypass our logical rational mind. So so you have to it's a balance, really. It's like, is this environment really detrimental to my health? And if I feel that it's affecting my well-being, then perhaps it's every time I walk down the street, perhaps that's why people wire themselves into their music all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to try and keep themselves in a nice headspace, rather than, like you say, constantly hearing and responding to those things. So so I'm just thinking, I mean, I would imagine then that even the pitch and the tone of these alarms, of these sirens, of all these sort of things, has been purposefully used so that it does hit that part of our brain that's going to respond to that, right? So in a way, our evolution, if you like, by using these alarms now for things like ambulances and police and fire alarms and those sorts of things, we've used like the natural senses and taken it and kind of pitted it against it so that we're always going to have that response. So whenever you hear, because I know I get that in the car when I'm driving, and I can be listening to music, it doesn't matter whether it's classical or pop or anything, doesn't really matter. But the minute I hear that siren coming from somewhere, I know I switch out of I could be singing along or whatever, but somewhere it hits me. And that just makes perfect sense to you, because I've been like singing my heart out, in some instances. I love to sing in the car, so I'm singing my heart out, something hears it, something logs, and I'm straight out of that zone and into another one, and looking for the flashing lights, looking in all my mirrors, that sort of thing. So that makes perfect sense. So yeah, I get what you mean as well, by whether or not how you cognitively process those alarms, whether you can think to yourself, okay, it's not me, I'm not involved, I can almost take myself out of it, or whether you can be as creative and imaginative as to think, how that car horn resonates beautifully with the sound of the blackbird singing. I mean, that I find, okay, I get where you're coming from, though. To be able to do that feels like you would have a real control over your environment as well, like another level, that would be pretty cool. I'm definitely going to try practicing that. But it's fascinating to me. So that that's where it comes from then. That comes from years and years, like millennia ago, when we were listening out for bird calls, animal cries, that sort of thing, when we were really living within nature and responding to the alarm calls that were out there for us to be able to know whether there was danger close, or whether we're not, I suppose we're coming towards water or something like that, whether we're in, you know, in the boundaries of the jaguar or whatever it might be, you know. And that's fascinating. I never thought about it like that. That's brilliant. So with that in mind, you know, the ancient kind of musical instruments that are used, are a lot of those based on natural sounds?
Yes, some of them are, and especially things like the voice. So I mentioned overtoning at the beginning of the
Yeah,
interview, and that was my doorway into therapeutic sound. Well, that
yeah,
was in Mongolia. There's a particular region where the singing started, near Tuva, and they think that it was first of all, start making the overtone sounds was like imitating the animals, but also the way the sound would whistle through the mountains.
wow,
So the shaman were trying to make that same sound so they could talk to the spirits.
yeah,
And so a lot of flutes, ancient flutes, were thought to be there to mimic bird calls, so that people who had bird totems, for example, would be able to talk to those to their spirits and the ancestors. So a lot of the instruments are either to communicate with or embody in some way those the animals. But also the tonal instruments are really interesting because the evolution of those would have come, so let's say the gong, for example, would have evolved from obviously from the drum. The drum is one of the most ancient instruments that we have other than the voice.
yeah,
And it would have been something that's beaten, and it's made out of wood or animal hide,
mm,
so whatever materials were available. But then as the Bronze Age happened, of course people hadn't then had metal, and that was magic, you know, because alchemists were held in really high regard. You know, if
yeah,
you can transport, if you can get metal out of stone,
yeah,
that's magic, you know.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's when the idea of sacred instruments would have been born, because anything that's made from metal, so you know, weapons, obviously, that a lot of them in ancient times had very sacred, almost godlike qualities to them.
mm,
And on the other side of the spectrum, things like your singing bowls and your gongs, so that the first instrument of the tonal range that would have probably have been made would have been a gong. It's the easiest thing to make. You just
mm-hmm,
take your metal, you hammer it out into a flat piece, really, and then you can strike it and it's going to make sound.
mm-hmm,
And then from there would have evolved more complex gongs, gamelans, singing bowls, all of that kind of thing. But I think the effect, and this is something that still actually we're not 100% sure about yet, when we're looking at altered states of consciousness,
mm,
the effect that people would have had by playing those instruments would have been very soporific. I mean, it would have been the drug of the day, if you like.
oh, yeah,
Right? So, yeah.
yeah,
So there's evidence in various Neolithic caves of where they have stalactites that come down from the ceiling, and they've shown that there are actually not only marks where people have hammered them, so you can see they've actually been struck, but there are also marks telling you exactly where to strike for maximum resonance.
wow,
And then when you actually strike them, the whole it's amazing. It's a particular type of rock they're called lithophones, and it's almost like a ringing sound that comes from the stone. So
yeah,
it's tonal. And then when there's a wonderful branch of archaeology called acoustic archaeology, and what they've done is they've kind of mic'd up these spaces and played the sound within the space, and they found that it actually creates alpha brainwave generating sound.
wow,
So anybody that was in that space that would have played that stalactite for
yeah,
an extended period of time is likely to have gone into some kind of altered state.
yeah,
So were we trying to make the instruments that encourage that state? So
yeah,
are we consciously as humans been going out to try and find a way. And I think that that's something that is, for me, that's a key part of my research. I believe that there's this drive for humans to get that deeper connection with other, whatever that is. So it could be each other, it could be, spirit, our ancestors, whatever the cosmos, whatever it is, that gives us that greater level of connection, and we try and find ways to do that. And so I think it's a combination of communicating with the spirits, creating instruments that make the same or similar sounds to enable us to do that, and also the feeling that we get when we're in that alter state. And I think that probably we'd have gone out to try and find instruments that felt good in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because when you talk about the alpha brainwave state, you're going to like a hypnotic state then, aren't you? Being able to receive and perceive things differently. And so that's fascinating. I mean, that's fascinating. I'd love to go to one of those caves and hit the stalactites and feel. That's amazing. I mean, I've been in there's loads of caves in Thailand where they actually make their temples part of the mountain or part of the cave, and they'll bless the cave and they'll bring lots of things in. And a lot of times there are these stalactites that have, traditionally in Thailand, they wrap these kind of different coloured scarves around them, and they're almost like as a kind of like there's something spiritual or something amazing about them. And I'll be honest, I've always thought that it's just because it's the inside of the mountain that's almost fallen down, a little bit like a little bit like the tonsils at the back of the throat or something like that, something that you can actually, it has actually come down to be received by smaller beings than the mountain itself. But now I'm sort of thinking, well, maybe back over thousands and thousands of years before, musical instruments were as there were so many that we can choose from now. I mean, there's so many different types of instrument and different types of tune and song and tone and pitch and all these different things. But maybe then that was something else that they went back to for their prayer, because a lot of the old ancient religions are all about, like you say, using the voice to really instigate this different state of consciousness, altered state of consciousness, like you say, repeating the same mantra over and over and over again, whether you know what it's saying or not, doesn't seem to matter. It's the repetition, the constant repetition of the sound. It feels like using your vocal capabilities in all parts of your body to resonate that same resonance through your physical self every time you repeat these words. So that's fascinating. So tell me a little bit about the voice then, because like I say, as a very, very amateur loving singer, I would love to know more about how we can use our voices to perhaps emulate some of this, kind of, get ourselves into a place of high vibration.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, low tones relax and high tones stimulate. So we talked a little bit about the alarms.
Yeah.
So if you think about your Buddhist temples that you'd have gone into, you'll very rarely hear a Buddhist monk going Om.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Never.
And it would be a bit weird if you did. So they're trying to get that low pitch, because that low pitch is a pitch that's very soporific. It's very relaxing. Due to the way, again, we process sound in the brain, basically lower pitches, they have a feeling of slowing down time.
Wow.
Right. So the longer, if you can get that lovely long, it doesn't even have to be an Om, it can be an R sound or an oo sound, whatever you feel you can sustain for a long time, a fair time. If you're running out of breath too quickly, you're probably not going to be as relaxed as if you try and find a pitch that's comfortable for you, but towards the lower end of the range, and just sit comfortably and just begin to tone that tone, whatever it, whatever pitch doesn't really matter as long as it's within the lower end of your range. It doesn't have to be 252 hertz or anything like that, just low. And then just keep going, and that's it. That really is it. And you'll feel I mean, one of the research that we've done at the Academy has actually measured the different altered states of consciousness and the therapeutic benefits of being in an altered state. All right, so there's all kinds of benefits. So we talked about spiritual connection and feeling that there's getting close to that, whatever that thing is that you feel greater than you.
Yeah,
right?
source
So
to whatever. Yeah.
Whatever that,
Yeah.
And so that and that and it boosts mood state as well. So you know, cortisol levels, which is stress hormones, going to drop, and the pleasure chemicals, the reward chemicals such as dopamine is going to increase. Sorry, my little puppy's come to join us now. The camera's going a little bit wobbly. And so basically, so the dopamine will increase, and oxytocin can be released as well, which is another pleasure chemical. And so it boosts mood state. So as well as that, it's relaxing, so it can lower blood pressure, heart rate, release muscle tension in the body and physical pain. So all of that can actually be achieved just by singing at a low pitch, basically.
Well, it makes well scientifically, like in terms of the physical sense of the body as well, because when you reach those low tones, you kind of have to bring it up from the diaphragm, don't you? You know, you're really looking at that kind of lower gut area to kind of really resonate from. And of course, then when you begin to vibrate the diaphragm, you're shaking all the nerves around the solar plexus, you're vibrating that lovely low relaxing frequency through them, but also shifting it. You know, anything that you're holding tight, like you say, stresses, anxieties, worries, you know, any disease that's around the stomach. And as we know, from the gut comes all of our health, you know, immune health, mental health, emotional health. It all sort of resides around that area, which makes perfect sense when you think that all nerve endings of the body pass through that area as well. So when you resonate from that lower gut and you begin to really sort of sing out in a long, low, deep kind of tonal or note, you're going to resonate all through that stuff, like as the localized area. It hasn't even got to go very far to be able to work its magic, really, has it? It's kind of just
not at all.
Ready to go.
Yeah, and that's another amazing thing is you're literally giving yourself an internal massage, which the voice is. It really is the most powerful musical instrument that we have in our toolkit. You know, the closer that you are to the instrument, the more powerful it affects us. So because with the voice, we are the instrument. So it's the most powerful. It's the one that conveys our emotion. You know, so I mean, how many times have we've watched somebody sing on telly or at a concert, and you just feel moved by the singer's voice, you know. So it's a very powerful tool. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And what about, so in that respect, because obviously like nowadays the voice is used synthetically so much, like in pop music, I'm thinking specifically. I mean, it's a bit different, like you say, with live music and stuff, you know, the singer's really got to bring it onto the stage and create all that emotion for their live audience. But in terms of all the music that we listen to on the radio and on CDs and that sort of thing, a lot of it has been altered. A lot of it has been synthesized. You know, you've got a lot of pre-records and records that have been taken over and over and over again. So what's that doing to the quality of the music that we're actually listening to and absorbing into ourselves, irrespective of the words? Because that, for me, they're two different things. You know, the music that you hear, well, in fact, I would think there's three different things that come through to me as the untrained ear when I listen to music. Is you've got the melody, if you like, you've got the words that come through, and the emotion. You know, you've got, if there's any emotion that comes through with the words or not. You know, that seems to be, those two I used to think were really linked. You know, I think growing up in the 90s, you heard emotion. The 80s, well, they're brilliant, weren't they? Everything was emotional in the 80s. Big power ballads and all that sort of stuff. And you really felt that emotion come through. Whereas now, sorry, I just cut out then. Now it feels like the words and the emotion can sometimes be completely distanced. You know, you don't have people will say things that would, the words itself would strike an emotional chord with me, but there's not the emotion attached to it anymore. So how do we receive that information, like those songs now? Is it like kind of almost superfluous noise, or are we still looking for that interaction but not finding it? Like, because sometimes, and I don't know, this is just me kind of going out in a bit of a limb, but sometimes I'll listen to things and I feel so disconnected. Like the melody is amazing, the beat is really amazing, the words don't really mean anything because there's no real, I think it's the emotion or the force or the dynamic or whatever it is. There's none of that behind it, and so it leaves me feeling like, oh, nice tune, but again, I've disconnected from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that is a really good way of using the mindfulness tool along with the sound.
Yeah.
Right. So you are, when you're feeling that you're somehow disconnected. Now, obviously you can look at this in so many different ways, right? So as a sound therapist,
Yeah.
you know, if I might ask you, what do you think that you would need in order to feel more connected to the music?
Yeah.
And then whatever you said to me would give me an indication as to perhaps what might be going on for you. So, for example, if a client comes to me and I do this, I might think that I'm doing this amazing gong bath, you know, and they might think, I might think, that was pretty good actually, you know.
Yeah.
I'm quite pleased with what I've done.
Sure.
And the client goes, no, I didn't really feel it. You know, I just felt disconnected from it. Now, how I because it's with it, there's only you in your process.
Yeah.
Right. So it's how you receive it that's more important than what I can think I've done the best job. You know, obviously I like to think I've done a good job, you know, so I put my heart into what I do, but then I have to leave it at the door because the client's going to receive it however they want to, depending on what's going on for them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's one way of looking at it. So if you're feeling disconnected from that piece of music, great tune, as you said, you know, amazing beat, and so it's moving you in other ways, but what is it about the vocal that it leaves you feeling disconnected? Now, you're I don't want to put words in your mouth, so let's say if somebody said that to me, it might be that they say, well, it just sounds as if it's coming from a robot, not a human, you know, because it's both is synthesized, you know. And so that would tell me there's something for that client around human connection, which is really important for them.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, it's we can look at it really deeply, you know, or so it's what do I do with this now I've got it? What do I do with this feeling of feeling disappointed with this track? You know, it might just be, don't really fancy it. You know, it's like tea or coffee. We prefer one or the other, right? So, but if it kind of creates a bit of a charge inside us, it could be that we're telling ourselves something at a deeper level. But you asked me about the synthesized music. Well, we've done quite a bit of research on that, because when I brought out many years ago a CD called Chakra Balance, and it was my very first CD, and I was quite excited about going into a studio and everything. And I really honestly thought that this is going to be something nice for people to listen to, but it's not. I didn't expect it to be therapeutic.
Okay.
Right? And yet when I was working on it in the studio, I could feel energy moving through my body. I thought, no, this is just placebo, you know, this is, but I could really feel it. So we did some research on later pieces of music, because what we're working on now, what I'm working on is something called consciously designed music. Which is actually using how we process sound in the brain and basically composing pieces of music to help to affect mood state, you know, or relax us or energize us based on that kind of innate programming that we have.
Yeah.
because I was so surprised that actually people can sometimes go into a slightly deeper state when they're listening to music, even though it's been digitized, if you
Yeah.
like, and processed. We still respond based on those ancient, that wiring we've got in our heads, you know,
Yeah.
and in
Yeah.
our bodies. The only difference I found was that, and many, I guess many of listeners will relate to this, that if you're doing a live sound bath and you're actually in the room, then
Mm.
people will feel it more physically
Mm.
in their bodies, and they'll also be more emotionally moved by it. So if you think of standing on, you know, in an audience and watching your favourite, you know, band or whatever on the stage, you're going to physically feel that bass in the body.
Yeah.
Also the whole vibe of being in the audience and, you know, sharing it live is a
Yeah.
very special thing. So you're going to feel moved emotionally
Yeah.
by that. But when you look at altered states of consciousness, which is something that is really important in our work, in our method, is to maximize an altered state.
Mm.
You want to minimize the amount of what shall I say, distraction by sort of outer influences, if you like.
Okay.
So what came out of our research was that people went into a slightly different type of altered state, but a deeper one, when they were listening to music through headphones.
Okay, so they weren't distracted by the physicality of, like you say, the beat or something resonating
Yeah.
with rhythm, and yeah, I mean, like that kind of 808 beat that just goes choom 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 straight through the heart and every fibre of your body. So when it was localized and straight into like the auditory channel, it, I suppose, changed the brainwave without distraction from the physicality. You're able to almost leave your physical experience of music and just take it into the mind and connect with spirit or connect with consciousness in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly. Because
Yeah,
physical stuff keeps you in your physical body,
of course.
doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Of course. Oh, it's fascinating. Oh, exciting work. Let me know how you get on with that. That's great.
Thank
So
you.
the BAST method of sound therapy is specific to you. You've designed this based on all your experience and I mean, sounds fascinating life that you've led, exploring all these sorts of things. But it combines sound and voice work with self-reflection, mindfulness, and self-awareness. So you're teaching all of that in a class or a session, are you?
Yes.
Yeah. So you would go through all the mindfulness techniques that you would use, and then do your clients then feed into you, or do you feed the music into them? You know, would you sort of, I want to say diagnose, I don't know whether that's the right word, but would you diagnose what perhaps they might need depending on the symptoms that they're presenting or the reason that they've come to you, and then decide on the instruments that you would use and the tones that you would use? How does it work?
Do you want to have a go?
I'd love to have a go. What do I have to do?
Okay, so I'll just take you through just a very short little visualization, and then we'll see where we go with that.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Yep.
Okay. So just closing the eyes and just going within, just locating your center and taking a couple of breaths. And now I'd like you to draw your mind to a time in your life where something amazing happened. So it could have been maybe you won an award, or when you first fell in love, or whatever that experience was to you. And just really feel that in your body. Just feel the feelings in the body. And then on your next breath in, just multiply that feeling by 10, 20, 30. Just feel it radiating throughout you. And now I'd like you to just to cast your mind to maybe something that you've seen on the telly or read in a newspaper that wasn't so pleasant, something that disturbed you in some way. And just notice how you feel when you think those thoughts. And then on your next breath in, go back to that first visualization again, the one where you had an amazing experience in your life, and just breathe that right through your body, out through your skin. And then when you're ready, just come back to the space. Okay, so the first visualization then, the one where you felt amazing and in your life, something happened in your life.
Yeah.
Just give me some words to describe how you felt when you thought about that.
Light, bright, full, golden, huge, just a huge expanse all around me.
Great. Okay. And how about the second one?
Small, like very, I mean, marked, even with my breathing, I noticed that my breathing got shallower as well when I was thinking about it. And small and lethargic, no energy, sort of slumping down, grievous, tight even across my chest. That's what I mean by when my breathing got shallower, just felt tight across the chest. Yeah, I like the first one. Like the second one.
Okay, so this is great. This is good stuff. So basically the first feeling that you had was resonance. So remember me talking before about the law of physics and how energy follows thought. So your thoughts are going to that thing that happened in your life, and your whole system is responding with more energy.
Yeah.
Right? So you're all of a sudden there's resonance there. So it's light, bright, it's big, it's expanded, golden, you said as well.
Yeah.
And so at that point, there's all those lovely, you're flooded with all those lovely, yummy chemicals, right, of feeling good. And then your thoughts go to something that's not so good. And you feel almost the polar opposite, small, constricted.
Yeah.
You felt it even physically in your body.
Yeah.
That's resistance. So again, energy follows thought. Your mind goes to something not pleasant, your energy drops, and you're then aware of perhaps physical, emotional, mental. So there might have been thoughts going on around this thing that you'd seen, you know, I don't know, whatever it might be for you. So for some people it could be, you know, it's not fair, or life is cruel, or life is fearful, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's your resistance. What you did, so what actually did you do in order to change all of that? Because you went on an amazing journey then, and you didn't really, you sat there and just changed, you know, where you were at. So what did you actually do in order to create all of those different things?
Literally changed like the visualization. Really, like re-seeing, wasn't it? It's like re-seeing things. Yeah. And looking again at things from that memory, though, from like the perspective I had at the time, not the perspective that I might have of it now. You know, like that's what I love about reliving past experiences. And actually, when you ask someone to relive it rather than recount it, they go into that physicality, don't they? They go into that physical space, and like you say, they feel it. And I mean, I noticed straight away my breathing, even my chest wanted to sort of go. You know, it was so full. And then again, like I said before, when I go into like the darker place, the darker thought pattern, and I was actually thinking about those 49 people who got, you know, who shot, and it just makes me worry is really the thing. I don't really feel fearful, that sort of thing. It doesn't, but it's just the worry. It's the worry of where humanity's going. It's the worry for me of those people and what they've gone through, and what the repercussions and stuff will be. That for me was the kind of the low resonance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's understandable, isn't it? We're all, anyone with humanity there, with a heart,
Yeah,
going to respond. So you changed your mind, you changed your thoughts.
Yeah.
So basically that is when you go from that resistance back to the resonance at the end, it's releasing those resistant thoughts by changing your mind, right? Mm-hmm. So basically, at the beginning of any treatment, we would do that exercise.
Yeah.
And that's because we have a model called the 5 R's. So resonance, resistance, release are 3 of the R's. Reflection is what you're doing when you're actually reflecting now, telling you what was going on in your body and your mind, your emotions.
Yeah.
And then responsibility is the other R. And that's basically about us being us understanding that we're the only ones in our process, and we're therefore the only ones that can change our mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our own mind, right?
Yeah.
So that's basically the mindfulness model we use.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were sitting in a session now, what I'd do is I'd say to you, so after sort of demonstrating that model, because some people, obviously you're very self-aware and you've done a lot of stuff in your life to kind of hone that skill, but for some people it's very new, that whole idea of actually looking at themselves in that way is not something they've done.
No.
So we always do that exercise first, so people can get an idea of, okay, that's resonance, the big feeling, and then the small feeling is resistance. So and now I know when I'm interacting with my environment what state I might be in. Yeah. And then I might say to you, okay, so what is it you want to work on in this session? So you might say whatever it is, back pain, for example. So then I would ask my client then to just go into themselves and think about their back pain and how it impacts their life, and then tell me what they're feeling and where they're feeling it in the body. So that locates the point of resistance. Yeah, so it's like, so you're absolutely right. It is a diagnosis, but it's a self-diagnosis. The client finds exactly where their points of stress are in the body. And so we then as therapists, we get to know, okay, is it mental, emotional, physical? Is it a bit of everything? Is it a spiritual thing? What is it about for them? And then we then can, based on the psychology of the instruments that I spoke to you about before, is we'll be able to choose certain instruments to help to work with whatever they're bringing to the thing.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So we'll always take them into an altered state of consciousness, or at least we can't force that, but that's the aim. And in that state, because it promotes resonance, because it enables us to connect with something greater than, what happens is what we call the construct, this thing that you're feeling in the body. So across your chest there could be actually part of the construct that could, there might be other stuff in there, stresses, beliefs, whatever, right? So, but that can basically be released. So it softens, and then through that there could be insights that come up that help you to make connections as to why this is, so why have you got your back pain, for example, and so it's a whole little journey you go on with the sound technique.
Fascinating. And all the different instruments resonate with different parts of the body, like in the physical body.
It's more, there is a bit of that,
like with certain tones affect the liver, for example, other things affect the heart, something else affect like muscles, or is it that specific? Or
it tends not to be that specific in our method, because there's a general rule of thumb. So for example, if people come with a lot of physical stuff, we'll tend to choose more physical instruments. So like the gong or the drum, so things that people can feel in their physical body, because that can be quite soothing if there's pain or arthritis in the body. And then if it's something, again, if we want to promote let's say deep relaxation, we might use something much softer and more expansive. It's not to say you can't relax deeply with the gong, it's how you play it. So we've got to, you know, we take that into consideration as well. So we're thinking about the instrument in terms of the construct. So what is the client presenting us with? The ASC, so the depth of ASC we want to induce or attempt to induce, and the psychology of the instrument. So how that instrument, and we've done, I mean, we've seen thousands of people over the years and basically asked them. That's how I put the method together. Is for from 1997 to 2000, I went out on the road, if you like, and I did all the festivals, I did all the exhibitions, and I saw loads and loads of clients and loads of people. I said to them, how do you feel when you hear this bowl? How do you feel when you hear this gong? How about the drum? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then that then gave us like a psychology, a general rule of thumb of how people actually respond to certain instruments. And so we now use that in the method as well.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. And so what sort of, you know, do you have a lot of clients that come to you with like presenting diseases, symptoms, or is it majority physical, majority emotional, really, you know, and kind of mental health, or is it, you know, a mad, crazy mix of the two, or what really, you know, I suppose, I don't even say what's the most successful, because I would imagine that depends on each individual, how open they are to it. Like you say, getting somebody to resonate directly in with their own thoughts and feelings. As you very well said, you know, so many people are so disconnected from their physical selves that they perhaps wouldn't recognize some of the feelings that I might recognize, or you might recognize, for example, but they know they're feeling something and it feels a bit weird here, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I should imagine that every person is different. But do you find that there's more of a calling for one thing or another?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think one of the things that I found really surprising is that belief doesn't really come into it. And I thought it did. I thought, well, it's obvious it's going to. And I guess, you know, probably that was a bit black and white, what I just said there. Possibly for some people it does. But we have had the odd occasion where somebody has bought a treatment for their friend who's really not into the idea of coming for sound therapy, and literally pushed towards the therapy room, you know, and sits there and he's blown away, you know. So we've had skeptical people who have just been absolutely, you know, transformed, and I guess you could say that on some level then they must have been open to it, otherwise they wouldn't have been there, even if they were, you know, trying to appease their friend, you know. I guess they really didn't want to do it, they wouldn't. So maybe on some level they were open to it. So, but I mean, everything and just amazing things, you know, like I think one of the biggest turning points that got me into research was I was doing a sound bath. It was just a little demonstration. It wasn't even anything huge, you know. It was just a little presentation for a group that asked me to go along at a spiritualist church, actually. They said, would you come and do a little demonstration? And so, and I was about 5 minutes into the Himalayan singing bowls part of the session, and there was a lady who was in a wheelchair, and tears started coming down her cheeks, and of course everybody had their eyes closed, and so we just allow, it's quite common to have some kind of release, you know, and that was fine. And at the end of the session, which was only about maybe 15 minutes long or something, she said that she'd broken her back in a car accident 8 years before that. And she said during the Himalayan bowls, she started to get the feeling in her feet. So
the vibration, like the nerves.
It was just the sound, just something about the sound. She started to get pins and needles in her toes. And she hadn't felt that, you know, since the accident. So, you know, it's things like that. And it was just like, well, I've just got to know what's going on with this, because And that's just, that's just a tip of the iceberg. There's so many, clients that we've seen that have had remarkable things like coming off long-term pain medication, for example, and, people with cancer who have reduced their very strong medication, and people at the end of their lives who are reducing, they're getting a better sense of well-being, enabling them to let go. And maybe reducing their medication as well. So everything from that to people who are just stressed out executives that just want to switch off for a while, and everything in between. But we also do, as well as that, that's the kind of what we call passive treatments, like the sound bars and the one-to-one, where people come in, they lay down, they receive. But we also have an Arts for Health program where we do a lot of participatory stuff. So we might be working in special education in a school somewhere, or in occupational health, and doing a lovely soundscape where all the kids get together and they're playing all the instruments, and they're kind of exploring that and communicating with people through sound. I mean, sometimes we do therapeutic drum work where there might be people. In fact, there was one of our students was working in one of the refugee camps, and a lot of the people are so traumatized they can't talk about what's happened.
Yeah.
But if they're asked to talk through rhythm, so it's like drum out your week, or drum out what's happened, is they don't have to share anything that might be shameful or too traumatic, but they can talk about it through the instrument.
Through a rhythm, and being physically releasing that way, I suppose, as well.
That's it. And just to start softening that thing, whatever's been
the process as well, isn't it? Like when you're in real trauma, like I have a friend who has post-traumatic stress disorder, and she is managing various different ways, but she lost her daughter and her sister in the tsunami in 2004. And there are times when it's just accessing, like what she calls the brutal memories, which she can't do vocally. She can only do it through movement, and this is kind of one of the things that kind of led me into my line of work as well, was just really seeing how powerful just to move your body initially is, and how deep that actually goes. As superficial as it perhaps might look, that you're, like flinging an arm out, and just random movements. Actually, it's not random when it's expressing and it's releasing. Again, when you bring that in and you look at the nerves and you look at where they're going, and you look at the science, if you like, of it. And for me as well, like with the energy centers and the chakras and the breath work and how it leads into the heart. Often the left arm is flung out because it's like that direct representation of like heartbreak. And, that sort of stuff is fascinating. And that's where I really see that sound therapy would be an amazing addition to somebody's general health, because there are some things that you're just not even aware right now that you need to process. For one reason or another. Maybe it's just been something that's come in and you've just dropped it there and you've left it there because you've got to go on. Life's busy, isn't it? I mean, it's one of the problems with stress as well. It doesn't give us the opportunity to process what we need to process. It takes us on to the next thing. And so if really, really severe stuff is happening in your life, I can see how sort of the post-traumatic stress disorder, which used to be just sort of finite for people who are coming out of traumatic situations like war and, like extreme death or, some random experience, but all the trauma that we're experiencing being layered and layered and layered on top, and nobody having the kind of the time even, let alone the ability, let alone the support network to be able to access that and release it and let it go. It feels like a boiling pot for me. I look around the world and everybody's so stressed, and I always feel like, God, this is just a boiling, it's a boiling pot. It's going to be a nightmare. And we see little sparks of it, like the guy in New Zealand, 49 people, like the kids taking machine guns to their schools in America. And, you see little pockets of it, like little volcanoes where it's gone off. But at some stage, it feels like to me there's going to be this big sort of tectonic shift, if you like, to kind of bring it into the sphere of the earth. And something will have to go, and it'll be a big shift for us. And I'm hoping that it will be a conscious shift. But I do have that feeling of it has to come out physically, first. It can't just all be processed here. At some point it's going to come out, and whether it be via illness, that's what we're seeing at the moment. I think like the physical representation of that for me is the illness that we're seeing physically, mentally, emotionally. You know, it's huge, and across the planet and through many different cultures, many of which you wouldn't even think were linked, but because we are all one, I mean, my belief, but because we are all one and we are all sharing the same consciousness, and like you said, trying to return back to this one thing that we've all come from, and we're feeling that separateness now, you know, more than ever, because we're so unhappy where we are. You know, before, I think, where there was a level of spirituality that was built into our lives through religion, or through a faith, or through just being in nature, you know, for the majority of us a lot more deeply than we are now, is getting so disconnected that we're at that point where we're over this separateness. You know, we're all struggling out for something else. And this is, again, why things like sound therapy really, I think, capture my attention and capture something in me that it says, oh, this is something that's really fundamental. Like you say, we're all born with a voice. What's the first thing that you do when you're born? You cry out, don't you? You use that sense of voice. You use that sense of sound. And, you know, it's, yeah, that for me, it's kind of like just beginning to piece everything together so that I can build a greater understanding. And I know that sound must have, you know, a huge part to play in all that. And from everything that you're telling me, it's kind of just layering on top of that. I'm like, well, this big thing is going to happen here, you know. Yeah.
Well, do you know what? I think what we're witnessing, I mean, since I started working with complementary medicine, I mean, back in the 80s, it was like you were, I mean, I keep like a little sort of scrapbook of clippings, and I remember organising a holistic health festival, and the local church actually took out a half-page ad about how I was leading people down the path of the devil. I mean, that is how holistic therapies were viewed, you know, in days. And I know they are, you know, so there are some people who are sort of against them and obviously they're entitled to their own beliefs, but it was really, you know, it was really alien to people, you know, and yet now you can go to your local petrol station and you're bound to find a shampoo with aromatherapy oils in it or something, you know. So it's so mainstream now, and I think that shift is happening because I know we're seeing an enormous amount of chaos, but I'm seeing an enormous amount of people who are being drawn to, you know, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, sound therapy. The millennials are amazing. You know, the amount of young people, whereas before the demographic we would have, you know, is more sort of older people who are looking for maybe more meaning in their life, or they've, you know, the kids have grown up, now they're looking to kind of do some more heart work, if you like. Now it's the younger people, and they've got amazing ideas of how to take it forward, and it's actually very vibrant and exciting. And so I think that I'm a great believer that human consciousness is where it needs to be in all its craziness, because it has to learn.
Absolutely.
You know, and if there are people that are kind of, sometimes we don't change until we're in the chaos, when we have to change. We have to change. And other people can make the change much more easily, and they're more flexible and more resilient to that. Whereas some people cannot make the change until they're forced to make a change. And there's when you're aware, when the world is aware of a change happening, there are some that, because they fear the change, want to kick back against it. And I think perhaps that's kind of what we're seeing now. We're seeing, you know, the atrocities that we see, you know, and we're seeing the amazing things that we're seeing. I mean, you know, there was a program just last night about the oceans and, you know, the damage we're doing and how we've got to clean things up. I mean, I don't think there's ever been more awareness of that now, and a drive towards that, you know. So I, you know, when you look at things like, you know, SpaceX and Elon Musk going off to Mars, and, you know, all of that kind of thing, it's, I mean, what an amazing time to be alive.
Really. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I agree.
And I think I often think about like my life and a lot of the experiences that I've had. And I agree with you 100%. I don't know if I would have learned as well as I've learned had I not had the harsh experiences that I had to go through. And I see, because I've got 3 children, and all 3 of them are very, very in tune with the natural world, with their peers, they're very much more aware than I ever remember being. And I'm kind of like, you know, trying to get them back to nature and throwing them out in the wilderness whenever I can, and, you know, and saying, you know, off the screens and that sort of thing. But they're learning a different way as well, and they're learning very much through receiving, and they can receive so much more than we could. You know, like when I was young, you know, you had television on for kids, and it was very much kids TV. It wasn't about children expressing themselves or via YouTube or online platforms or anything like that. It was older generations giving the younger generations what they felt they needed to learn. Now the kids are able to learn from their peers. They're able to almost grow together. And I think that, like you say, you know, consciousness is exactly where it needs to be able to go on the journey it has to go on. And you know, I agree. What a great time to be alive. But yeah, it's just, the whole thing's fascinating. But I still feel like underneath it all, you know, and it's that whole, the whole resonance of vibration as well, isn't it? You know, and you can feel it. And I think that's where perhaps for me, the link with the sound comes in as well. It makes perfect sense to me that the lower tones would be the more opening, the more, you know, the ones that are going to induce the kind of more altered conscious states, and where the higher tones would take you into a high vibration of higher energy, because that's certainly how I feel when I sing. And if I go into a lower tone, it tends to be much more emotional. It tends to be more caring. It's from a deeper part of my soul almost. Whereas if you're a high pitch, it's high, it's fluffy, it's you know, it's up there, but it's moving, it's dancing, it's a higher vibe resonation, and you know, it kind of, it lifts me up as well, just through using my own voice. Whereas I think if I'm trying to shift something, if I'm trying to like birth an emotion or something like that, you know, really trying to get it out, it does tend to be those kind of guttural sounds. If you think about, you know, when people express when they've lost members of their family or people that they really care about, it's that guttural wail that kind of comes up and is all about the emotion. It's all about the loss and, you know, the scar into soul, into consciousness that this experience has produced for them. I just find it fascinating. You know, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Well, I think, you know, I think we do if we allow ourselves. I mean, what the point you made about people just kind of, or almost like pushing things down because they need to get to the next thing. I haven't got time to look at that now. You know, I've got to pick the kids up. I've got to, you know, do whatever I've got to do.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you know, it's like that. It's almost like a ruler, you know, kind of being stressed, and then what's it going to do? It's either going to break or ping. And either way, you know, either of those two sudden things really aren't going to
it's uncontrollable. It's gone. Yeah.
That's it, exactly. And but if we just give ourselves the time to be a bit more in the moment and to release when we need to. So, for example, research has shown that people who actually swear, so if you stub your toe on the door or something, you know, and you swore or you cried out, you're actually going to feel less pain than if you held it in.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting as well. Yeah.
So those,
I feel better now.
yeah, I'm sorry about my terrible language. I'm just releasing my pain.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant.
So yeah, I mean, and so it's exactly that. If we just give ourselves, it doesn't have to be a big thing that we do for ourselves. You know, it can just be very small little things, just being aware. Okay, what's sitting in my body now? Is it resonance? Is it resistance? Whereabouts is it in the body when I'm feeling it here? Okay, if it had a sound, what sound would it make? And then just using that, just literally, like you say, that usually is that guttural kind of gravelly sound. Just be careful not to, volume doesn't really matter because it doesn't have to be a primal scream. So what I found is if you can release it quite quietly, and not damage your vocal folds, which is really
Yeah.
important. You know, too much kind of screaming is going to hurt your voice.
Yeah.
And so just that gentle moaning, you know, and just keep going with it, and you find that the voice becomes sweeter the more you process. So you come out the other side of that gutturals into more of a kind of a sweeter tone.
Just
And
naturally.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that tells you you're done. And if you don't happen to be done, so if the phone rings and you think, oh, I've still got, you know, I could easily do another 5 minutes of this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
fine. You've done something, right?
Yeah.
So you return to it, you know, the next day or when you have got time, you know, and just work with it like that. So you can, and it's a much more healthy way of doing it than kind of bottling it up and waiting for something to break, you know. So
Yeah.
I mean, even I say to my students, you know, in the shower in the morning, you know, go in the bath in the evening, whatever, you know, even in bed. I mean, I've done it before now, you know, in bed with low tones when I've had back pain, for example, or shoulder, something with my shoulder, and I'll just go into that area and just kind of just use that low tone to just relax that area, you know. So it can be done. The voice is with you all the time. You know.
So on that, because I found, well, I do something similar when I you know, so I'll chant an and I always connect my hands, connect my thumbs to my chest, and then sing out from my heart center. And one day will be very different to the next in terms of what note that takes. And I always kind of try and bring, I suppose, everything that I am to that day, bring my hands towards my heart so that I'm really focused, and then kind of just sing out so that I feel like it resonates out through my hands, out into the universe. And that's almost like my call from my heart that day. So is that the same sort of thing? Like when you're just connecting inwards and you're just allowing yourself to express whatever it is. And sometimes it will be a higher pitch note. Sometimes it will be a lower one. I've noticed the same happens with my clients. We never strike the same. It's like we don't have a unique pitch that we will always go into unless there's some sort of training, unless there's been some sort of awareness of what's a good sound to make, you know, what's an you know, acceptable, or what sounds pretty to them reflected back or something like that. If I just ask them to go with where they are, because I can do 3 ohms and everyone will be at a different pitch. So that sounds similar to what you just explained, that actually as you begin to let go, so the pitch changes, and it's not about controlling it to bring it back. It's actually allowing that process so that it's a complete release and a really cathartic process for you of letting go of whatever it is that has come to you at that moment. Does that sound?
Well, I think what you're saying is kind of, there's 2 things going on there. I think that when you're actually, so if you're processing the construct, so if we go back to the tightness you felt in the chest, for example, when you had your visualization.
Yeah.
So if we were actually consciously processing that, then what we would do is you would be making the sound to actually go into that.
Okay.
So that's a little bit different to if you're bringing yourself to the universe and you want to give everything that you are. It's slightly more, you're working from a place of resonance there rather than a place of looking at the resistance.
Okay.
But either way, the sound is going to be different.
Yeah.
You know, so even if you look at your tightness in your chest, that the notes or the sound of that is probably going to be different as you go through your day, or you know, the next time you revisit it or something.
It's really interesting. Okay, that's great. I'm going to play with this resonance and resistance absolutely with my clients. And the same thing. Because,
do.
You know, as you're like you say, as you're bringing a sense of mindfulness into it and a sense of self-awareness and what it is that you're connecting in with for yourself, you can actively begin to release that emotion and release that tension and that sort of thing, can't you? I mean, and a lot of my clients don't, you know, obviously the sound Om really comes and seems to be really highly associated with Hinduism or Brahmanism. But often it's just that, like I will say that, you know, Om originated from the 3 syllables of the universe that have always been in every language, A, O, and you know, so think of it like that. Think of it beyond and above who you are now, what you are now, any religion, any belief system, anything like that. Think of it as being part of the, you know, something much bigger, much greater, and, you know, not depicted by time or space or anything like that, and go from there. But again, bringing that mindfulness into it will often bring a different different tone or a different note as well from them. It's fascinating. Great. I'm going to be working on this, Liz. Okay, well, look, we'll wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for talking to me. It's been an absolute pleasure and really, really interesting. I mean, fascinating. I just continue my own little personal journey with sound now. For everybody watching, be sure to check out the British Academy of Sound Therapy, BAST, online. Liz is the founder. She started it in 2000. They've got sound therapy courses. There are regular workshops going on. There's all sorts of things. And I know, Liz, you're going to be leaving us with an MP3 download. So I'm going to put Liz's email address at the bottom in the comments here. And also it'll be on this, it's already on the write-up that we have about the show tonight. So do go on there and email Liz, and she'll be able to send you the MP3 download so that you can have your own experience of an amazing magical sound bath, and something perhaps before bedtime, Liz, for insomniacs, or just to calm yourself in a traffic jam or something like that.
Anytime you want to just tune in, if you like, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Great fun. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so check out BAST online, and thank you again, Liz. This is Kirsty Taylor saying good night. Namaste.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination. You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.